Hello, welcome back to my Global Digital School of Art. Your timing is perfect. I've just finished my cup of tea and the next lesson for watercolours for beginners is just about to get underway. Okay, on this second little project I'm about to demonstrate, I will be working on cheap computer paper. I will be using the cheap brushes which I purchased and the actual cheap watercolour paints which I purchased. Bearing in mind I purchased these because I really don't know where you are in the way of materials, and I don't want you to suddenly think that you've got to have very upmarket stuff in order just to get underway. In the same way as you don't have to go out and buy a Ferrari in order to learn to drive. You drive on an old banger, and if you get to drive a Ferrari later on, fantastic. Okay, right, now these cheap little, well, they're not little, they're quite large tubes of watercolour paint. You get what you pay for here, and although they're large compared to, let's say, this is a student range one. This is a professional tube, and the student ones, they use fairly cheap pigments. They only grind them for 3 or 4 days. And then they fatten them out with what is known as emulsifiers. So it looks as though you've got more. The big problem with them is that when you finish painting, they leave that white bloom on the surface, which is the emulsifier in actual fact. But let's face it, if you're learning, you're going to use up lots of paper and lots of paint in the process. Right, the brushes, I've looked at them, just tested them, they're not that great. I don't know if I can actually get that in line there. It's got a little tiny point on it, and it sort of drops in. But there again, that's what I've got, so I won't blame the tools. Right, I've got my bowls of water here. And a cup of tea, and so think of this as much more in the way of it's a doodling exercise really. There is some logic in me using all these cheap items here, and that is there is nothing more daunting than being faced with a white sheet of paper and suddenly you think you've got to produce a masterpiece on it. And the moment you put a little mark on there, you start getting a little bit disheartened. It's very much like when I was at school, you get a new exercise book and you open it up, you put the date and you put your name in it, and then in the first line you'd misspelt something, so you had to scratch it out, and you felt that you'd lost the whole book. Well, in this case all you're going to lose is a little bit of paper. Alright, so I want you to actually relax. This is not art which is going to change the world, but it will make little changes in your way of thinking. Okay, let's get the lesson underway. On this little exercise we're going to be painting a little shrub type Christmas tree. What we're actually painting is really not that important. What is important is understanding and watching the flow of the colours. Right, now I've got a 2B pencil here. I'm not going to try and encourage any drawing. Drawing is fabulous as drawing, but too much drawing is not really compatible to watercolours. So just in order to get you started, it's a little bit like somebody holding the saddle of your bike, and psychologically you may need that little bit of security. So look, we're going to draw a very faint parallel line there and a vertical line down there. Okay, now only you need to be able to see that. We don't want to come along with an eraser afterwards. Okay, I've got my small palette here. I've got my mid yellow. So let's get some of the mid yellow on. I've got my ultramarine. Put my ultramarine down. And I've got, just wash my brush a bit. I've got my rose madder. Right. Now, I'm going to take my yellow and put some down the bottom. I'm now going to take a little bit of my blue and I'm going to add my blue to it, and I'm going to mix them in. Right, now, as I said earlier, by that process all I've got is one colour, and that is one colour green. And I add my darker colour to my lighter colour, because if I don't, I will keep adding more and more yellow to it, and I'll just end up with a plate full of one colour green. Now, get a little bit more water on there. Okay, right, now let's start at the top here. Okay, notice how my upright my brush is, by the way. And look, I've got lots and lots of water. I'm moving a puddle of water around here. And the gravity is actually taking the pigment down as I go, so it's keeping everything just a little bit dark. Now, everybody tends to think when they first start that Christmas trees grow like that, pointing down. Whereas in actual fact, they don't. They actually point up. So look, here we go. I'm just letting the little pointy tip of my brush dance around the paper. Coming down, letting that water flow down as much as I can, because if it doesn't flow down and get just that little bit darker, the tree will be upside down. It'll be dark at the top and light at the bottom. Right, coming down, extending out just a little bit. Don't be frightened to cross over one or two of these little stems. Look, as they come out, the sheer weight drops them down. They're still trying to grow up, but actually to the light, but they can't. Right, coming down to the little stem now, and plant it into the ground. Struggling a little bit with this little point, because look, everything gets repetitive, so I have to keep turning my brush around to avoid that. Okay, we have one little tree there. Let me put my palette to one side and I will zoom that in. There we go. Right. It's quite a nice shape actually, but it's very boring from the point of view of being just that one colour green. So I'm now going to do a second one. Wash my brush, find my pencil, and here we go. Just make sure I'm lined up. Okay, here's my line, and here's my vertical line coming in there. Once again, I can see it, and I think you can just about see it on the camera, but nobody else needs to see it. Right, get my brush, go back to my palette, take my yellow, take my blue. Right, now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, you will hear me keep talking, I'm going to knock the two together. And that is, look, I'm not over mixing them. If, I don't know if you can see this, let's get it up there. Look, see on the tip of my brush there's a little bit of blue and a little bit of yellow still on there. So I'm going to dip that in water just so it floats together a little bit on its own. I'm going to just check my colour. It's a bit dark, so knock in a bit more yellow. Just knock in a bit more yellow. That's a bit too yellow. Okay, a little bit of green. That will do. Right, here we go. At the top again. Just dance your way down. Make sure there's plenty of water on there so that it keeps floating down. I'm going to pick up a bit more water. Right, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to knock in a bit more blue to make it a little bit darker. And just knock it in. Right, back we go. Right, that is a little bit darker. It's not a lot darker, so I'm going to do it again. That's better. Bit more water. This is watercolour after all is said and done. And I want the actual, I'm floating a puddle about, I want the actual watercolours to start painting themselves. That is why, if you use a very small brush, you'll be looking for something to paint. And in this particular case, there really is nothing for you to paint. All you're doing is just giving a direction. Right, now I want to get darker still, so I'm going to take my blue and I'm going to add in just a little tiny bit of red. It will kill that colour off, but when I add it to the green, it now becomes very dark. Look, yeah, you can just about see that. Extending out as I get towards the bottom of my little tree. They're starting to drop down a little bit now, just by sheer length and weight, which will cause that in nature. Coming down to my stem now. Pick up a little bit more water. Keep it dark because I'm going to go under the tree, and it's deep shadow there. That's nice. That's really nice and dark. Look, my pointy brush is starting to give that repetitive shape again, so I'm twisting it about just a little bit. Okay, now I'm away from the shadow of the tree. I shall now add just a little bit more yellow and a little bit more water, and I'll come in from the outside edges and then on this one I'm going to go from the dark back out into the light. There could always be a little bit of shadow from the tree, of course. Right, now let me zoom that one in. Right, now if you go back and look at the one at the top, it's very bland because it is just that one colour. This one is multicoloured, all still within the green range, right? And I can do another one. Let's exaggerate that just a little bit, and I'll come in very light at the top. Let's get that in light. Make sure it's very light. Yeah, okay, here we go. Let's get that, make sure that's in line. Oh, I'm getting in the way of the camera. Here we go. Plenty of water on there, so it's floating very nicely. Right, getting just a little bit darker now. Knock those two together. Look, the puddle actually is coming down very nicely. That's interesting. So I'm going to start. I start back off in the puddle. Dance your way down. Right, now I'm going to start to add my little bit of red and my little bit of blue. A little tiny bit of red. Oh, I'm making hard work of this. Okay, here we go. And of course, all the time I'm fiddling around there, my watercolour is starting to absorb into the paper. Don't want that, so I need plenty of water in there. Let's make sure I've got that water. And yet at the same time I don't want that water to thin out the paint. Oh, this is quite a nice little one, this one. Right, back to my stem. Back to my little bit of ground. Plant the tree. Don't want it floating around. Right, now wash my brush. Pick up a little bit of that yellow. Just knock it in. Knock it in from the outside edge now, going in and then picking up from the dark, twist my brush just a little bit, coming out into the light. You can have a little bit of light just at this bottom piece because the stems which come this way also come out into the light at some point. Okay, let me now zoom that one in. Yes, a little bit more interesting than that one, and certainly a lot more interesting than this one. Right, I want you to look at this one quite closely now. Because I'm on the cheap computer paper, the water has started to stretch the paper where it makes contact, and it's starting to wrinkle, which means to say, look, the pigment is dropping off of the highest spot and dropping into the troughs, wherever the troughs actually appear. So that won't occur quite so much when you go onto your bit of cartridge paper, and it won't happen at all when you are brave enough to get onto your watercolour paper. Now, it's like I said before, what we're actually painting here is secondary to what is actually going on in your head, because you are actually starting to get a more sensitive eye to the difference between that item, that item, that item as such. Now, you need to be quite, well, not brave, you need to be very upfront and honest with what you're doing. And that's what I'm trying to be here. Look. 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 Look at this one. It looks like a green insect actually. It almost got legs on it. That one's not too bad. Another one here. Failed attempt, but I know when to abandon it and when to sort of push on. That one's not very nice shape on the side there. Look, this one's quite a nice one. That's not too bad. So let's isolate this one. And look, you've actually got quite a nice little painting there, right? I think if I go back to this one, that one might even be nicer because it's got a few more colours in it. So don't underestimate what you're actually doing here. For example, when I send out my Christmas cards, look, this is on an envelope, right? And I put them on the bottom there. You don't have to have all your art on a wall in a gallery, walking around with a little glass of wine and a couple of sausage rolls, and everybody saying, "Wow, superb." When I send these out, I will do 24 or so. Some will be better than others, but I can select who I send the better ones to, can't I? They don't know. But the nice thing is that when these drop in on the letterbox, along with all the brown envelopes with invoices and final warnings, there is something lovely and personal about when your card arrives. It's like a little gentle hug, isn't it? So look, you can practice these. Put them on the bottom of your envelope, or on the back if you want to. It's a birthday card. You can put your little cherries or balloons on there, and it has a wonderful effect on the people who actually receive them. It's like I said, it's a bit of you. It's a little personal hug. Okay, let's move on. Okay, having finished our little doodles, I want to pick up on a couple of technical points here. While I was painting, I was talking about my yellow and my blue and my red, and on the cheap range of paints, the yellow, which is really a cadmium yellow, they call it a medium yellow. The ultramarine was ultramarine, and the red, which I used on my first video, painting cherries, and I was using an alizarin, and I've easiness say I called it crimson. This one should really call crimson as well. In the cheap range, it's actually called Rose Madder, whereas in my student range it comes under alizarin. So they are very similar in colours. Different manufacturers call them by different names. This is why it's always so difficult to actually pin down a set colour one is using. So in this case, in the student range it's alizarin. In this one it's called Rose Madder. So let's just say rose by any other name, they still look the same. Okay, so don't start panicking that you haven't got the right name to your paint. Right, the next thing is I'm mixing up my yellows and my blues. I'm adding my blue to my yellow once again. Okay, I then just rinse my brush. I add a little bit of red to make that green darker, as I did in the video. And look, now maybe I can start to explain why I've got these two bowls of water here. Look, I've been using a little tiny one. Look, just in that little bit of demonstration I just gave you there on my palette, look at the colour of the water. Now that means to say that water will now contaminate any other colours which I'm going to use. If I suddenly wanted to go to a pale crimson, it would be contaminated by the yellow and the blue, so therefore it's not a true colour. It's not a true primary colour anymore. The other thing is I'm using this little tiny plate for the purposes of these demonstrations. Normally I would use my nice large plate, and the reason I actually use this, it's an old plate. These new plates act a little bit like your palettes, these plastic palettes you get. When you actually get two colours, just for example, if I get my yellow and my red together, and I've got quite a lot of water on there, they roll into little balls, or not on this big plate, but on pallets. They'll roll into little balls, so they're already pre-mixed. You've only got that one colour there. You'll have different tones of it, of course, in accordance to the amount of water, but you just end up with that one colour. That is why I tend to put them to one side, and that is why I knock them together, because I don't want that one colour. In the same way as that first little tree which I doodled, it was very boring because it just was that one colour, and it just had a little bit of extra tone in there. Right, so if you can, look for an old plate, go around to a boot fair, go around to your old granny, see if she's got an old plate. They're much better, alright, but make sure they're cream or at least white, alright. There's no point in having a nice flowery decorative pattern underneath it, you won't see anything at all. Well, just one more thing, just in case you thought you heard some dogs barking at the end of my last clip. Yes, it was true, that was my dog barking, and it barked dead on cue. It was in actual fact the postman. No, it was just circulars, brown envelopes, no little gentle hugs at all, I'm afraid. Now hang on the envelope, not from the postman. Now get a grip, alright? So enjoy, thank you very much for your time, and relax. It's really all about the enjoyment of painting. Now, having said that, I also noticed that I'm talking about the gremlins, your gremlins of self-criticism. I too have them. I noticed that when I'm actually painting and rambling on, I tend to forget to look at the monitor, and so therefore on that last clip some of my trees were a little bit out of line for you to actually see what's going on. Right, now I'm not going to beat myself up over that one. Just like you with your painting, I am on a steep learning curve, so I'm going to tell my little gremlin to go away, leave me alone, and I will get better. Okay, so take that on board, folks. Enjoy.